She said she was just keeping it safe. That's what my mom told me after she took my entire scholarship fund, every single dollar of it. But when she refused to give it back, I made sure she didn't just lose the money. She paid triple in taxes for what she stole. When I got that scholarship email, I thought my life was finally about to change. I was the first person in my family to get into college, and not just any college, my dream university. 4 years of tuition covered, a housing stipend, and a small monthly allowance for books. It wasn't just money, it was my way out. But what I didn't know back then was that my biggest problem wouldn't be grades or classes. It would be my own mother. I grew up in a small town where nobody really expected much from me. Our house was small, nestled between a dusty old diner and a gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Most people in our town didn't even finish high school, let alone go off to some fancy university. My mom worked 2 part-time jobs, one at the diner, serving lukewarm coffee, and another cleaning offices after hours. She was always bitter about how unfair life was. She'd come home, kick off her worn-out shoes, and sigh loudly enough for the whole house to hear. She used to say, "Some people are just born lucky. We're not." It was her favorite phrase, a kind of shield she'd put up to explain why things never seemed to go our way. She believed life was rigged, and there was no point in trying too hard because the outcome was already decided. But I never believed that, not for 1 second. I saw people around me making choices, working hard, and getting somewhere. So I decided I was going to be one of those people. I studied like crazy through high school. I'd be in my room, under a dim lamp, long after everyone else in the house was asleep. Textbooks piled up around me like a fortress. I stayed up late every night, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning, just poring over notes and practice problems. I took extra classes online, pushing myself to learn things that weren't even offered at my small high school. And just to save up a little extra cash for application fees and maybe a new pair of sneakers, I even worked part-time at that same dusty old diner my mom worked at. It was tough, balancing school, work, and trying to keep up with friends, but I felt like I was building something. I wasn't the smartest kid in my class, not by a long shot. There were always a few others who just seemed to get things instantly, but I worked the hardest. I truly believed that effort could beat natural talent any day. So when the university emailed me about a full academic scholarship, I didn't just cry, I sobbed. I remember the feeling of that email popping up on my old, clunky laptop. The subject line glowed, almost blinding me. "Congratulations! Full academic scholarship awarded." My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the mouse. It felt like every late night, every skipped party, every single ounce of effort I'd put in had finally paid off. I ran to show my mom, clutching the laptop like it was a winning lottery ticket, my voice cracking with excitement. I expected a hug, maybe a proud tear, a real moment. She didn't hug me. She just stared at the screen, her expression unreadable, and said, with a surprising lack of emotion, "Wow, guess all that studying finally paid off." Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Good thing you have me to help manage all that money. You don't want to mess that up." At the time, I didn't think much of it. I was so wrapped up in the sheer joy of it all, the relief that my future was suddenly within reach. I was just so happy she was even remotely proud, even if it wasn't the reaction I had pictured. It was rare for her to acknowledge my achievements, so I took what I could get. But now, looking back, with the benefit of hindsight and a much clearer perspective, that should have been my first red flag. It was the first little crack in the foundation of trust, a tiny warning sign that I, in my naive excitement, completely overlooked. A few weeks later, the scholarship funds arrived. The university handled the tuition directly, sending their portions straight to their own accounts. But the housing stipend and the book allowance, which totaled around $12,000, were sent to a joint account. This account was something my mom had insisted we open when I was 17, just before my 18th birthday. She said we needed it for emergencies and argued that her name had to be on it because I was technically still a minor when we set it up. I didn't really question it at the time. It seemed like a grown-up thing to do, and I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mom. I remember the day I logged into the bank account. I was checking to see if the funds had arrived, so I could start looking for textbooks and maybe a few things for my dorm room. My heart was fluttering with anticipation. I typed in my password, and the screen loaded. My eyes immediately went to the balance. It was supposed to show $12,000. Instead, it showed $300. $300. My breath caught in my throat. I refreshed the page. Again and again. Maybe it was a bug, a system error. There had to be a mistake. I called my mom, my voice tight with panic. "Mom, what happened to the scholarship money?" She barely looked up from her phone, scrolling through social media, as if I was interrupting something far more important. "Oh, I used some of it for bills," she said, completely casually, like she was talking about borrowing a pencil. "Relax, it's still in the family." Her tone was dismissive, almost annoyed that I was even bringing it up. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Used some of it for bills, $12,000 worth of bills. My mind was racing, trying to comprehend the audacity of her statement. That money wasn't for her. It wasn't for family bills. It was mine, earmarked specifically for my dorm room, my textbooks, my food, my life at college. It was my future, meticulously planned out by the scholarship committee. I tried to explain, my voice rising in panic. "Mom, the school could revoke the scholarship if they found out. This money is for specific things. You can't just take it." She just shrugged, her eyes still glued to her phone. "Then don't tell them," she said, as if it were the simplest solution in the world. As if concealing fraud was just another everyday chore. I felt physically sick. My stomach twisted into knots. I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling a profound sense of betrayal wash over me. I didn't know what to do. My entire plan, my escape, my future, felt like it was crumbling around me. I tried reasoning with her again, my voice pleading, explaining how important this scholarship was, how it was my only chance. I tried to make her understand the gravity of her actions, but she just laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh that echoed in the silence of the room. "You're not gonna survive college without me," she said with a smirk. "You'll thank me later." It wasn't a joke, it was a threat, a declaration of control. That night, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. It wasn't just about the money anymore, though the financial impact was devastating. It was because, in that moment, it finally hit me with a clarity that was both painful and liberating. My mom didn't want me to succeed. She didn't want me to spread my wings and fly. She wanted me to stay stuck, right next to her. She wanted me dependent, small, and under her thumb. And that realization, more than anything else, was what truly broke my heart. The tears flowed not just for the lost money, but for the shattered illusion of a loving, supportive mother. For the next few weeks, I kept quiet. I moved into my dorm room feeling completely hollowed out. My belongings were sparse. I had barely enough money for a single textbook, let alone bedding or toiletries. The other students in my hall were unpacking new clothes, setting up their expensive laptops, and decorating their rooms with posters and fairy lights. I just had a few worn-out shirts and a growing sense of despair. I borrowed what I could from sympathetic roommates, a spare blanket here, a pen there. I skipped meals in the dining hall, pretending I wasn't hungry, and picked up extra shifts at a campus coffee shop just to scrape by. Every time my stomach rumbled or I had to tell a friend I couldn't join them for a cheap pizza because I literally had no money, something in me burned hotter. The anger was a slow, simmering fire, fueling a determination I hadn't known I possessed. So I started digging. Late at night, in the quiet of my tiny dorm room, I pulled out all the scholarship documents I'd received. I reread every single line, every clause, every tiny footnote. I was desperate for an answer, a loophole, anything that could help me. That's when I found it. A small, unassuming section titled Misuse of Awarded Funds. It was tucked away on page 3, written in slightly smaller print, but it caught my eye like a beacon. It said very clearly that the university could audit and take action if the funds were used improperly. It even mentioned that if fraud was suspected, they wouldn't hesitate to involve federal aid departments and other government agencies. This wasn't just a school matter, it was bigger. That's when the idea hit me. It wasn't about begging for my money back anymore. Begging hadn't worked. Reasoning hadn't worked. I wasn't going to get her to understand through tears or pleas. I was going to make this official. I was going to leverage the very system she thought she was clever enough to outsmart. I drafted an email to the university's compliance office. My hands were shaking so much I had to retype sentences multiple times. I didn't outright accuse my mom at first. Instead, I pretended to ask a hypothetical question. Something like, "Hello, I'm a new student, and I have a quick question about scholarship guidelines. What happens if a parent uses a student's scholarship funds for personal expenses not related to their education?" I made sure to sound as innocent and concerned as possible, a student simply trying to understand the rules. The reply came 2 days later. It was polite, professional, and straight to the point. The compliance officer stated that such an action would be a serious breach of terms and could lead to revocation or require immediate repayment. Then, they asked for more details. They said that if I had specific concerns, they could look into it. My heart was pounding like a drum solo in my chest as I typed out everything. The joint account, the exact amount of missing money, the casual way she brushed it off, her refusal to return it. I attached screenshots of the bank statements showing the large withdrawal. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear as I pressed send. There was no turning back now. A week later, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the compliance officer. She spoke in a calm, measured tone, assuring me that they had received my email and were taking it very seriously. She said they were launching a full review, an internal investigation. She emphasized that I shouldn't tell anyone, especially not my mother, and that they would handle everything discreetly. I felt terrified, a cold dread in the pit of my stomach, knowing the storm I had unleashed. But I also felt a profound sense of relief at the same time. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Someone was finally listening. That night, my mom called me. Her voice was sharp, laced with a familiar accusatory edge. "Did you talk to anyone at your school?" she demanded, without even a greeting. I froze. How did she know? Apparently, the university had already contacted her. The compliance office had reached out for verification, for her side of the story. My carefully constructed hypothetical was now very real. She screamed at me for betraying her, for going behind her back, for being an ungrateful child. "You think you're better than me now? You don't even know how the world works," she shouted, her voice reaching a shrill pitch that always used to make me cower. But this time, I didn't cower. This time, something had shifted inside me. I took a deep breath, picturing the quiet strength of the compliance officer's voice. I stayed calm. I told her, in a voice that surprised even myself with its steadiness, "If you really didn't do anything wrong, Mom, you've got nothing to worry about." It was her own logic, twisted back on her. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking, yes, but it felt good, truly, deeply good. For the very first time in my life, I had stood up to her, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt like it was finally beginning for me. A whole month passed after that phone call. The silence from my mom was deafening, but it was also a strange kind of peace. I buried myself in my studies, trying to keep my head down and focus on the reason I was even there, to get an education, to build my own future. Every time I felt a pang of guilt, I remembered her laugh, her casual dismissal, and the hollow feeling in my stomach when I skipped another meal. That guilt quickly turned into resolve. Then one morning, I got another call. This wasn't from the school directly, but from a number with an unfamiliar area code. It was a financial investigator, working in conjunction with the university's compliance office. Their tone was much more formal, much more serious. They'd been looking into the irregularities. They'd traced the movement of the funds. And what they found was worse than I had initially thought. It turns out she didn't just use my scholarship money for generic bills. While some certainly went to household expenses, a significant portion of it, thousands of dollars, had been transferred into another account. This account, the investigator explained, was one she solely controlled, and it appeared to be primarily used for online shopping sprees, various credit card payments for things she hadn't told me about, and even some gambling websites. The casual disregard for the scholarship's purpose was breathtaking. Because the scholarship was partially federally backed, Many academic scholarships have some form of government support or oversight. The improper use of funds triggered something much bigger than just a university internal review. It initiated a full federal audit. This meant that the IRS was now involved. They needed my mom's tax returns for the past several years to verify all her income and how she reported this particular influx of money. When she refused to cooperate, citing privacy concerns, which, frankly, was hilarious given her actions, they flagged her for further review and officially sent the case to the IRS for full investigation. The university couldn't force her, but the federal government certainly could. She called me, predictably, in hysterics. Her voice was tight with panic, and for once, the anger was replaced by genuine fear. "I can't believe you did this to your own mother," she sobbed, completely ignoring her role in the situation. "They're saying I owe back taxes. They're asking for all my financial records. This is insane." I almost felt bad, almost. The sound of her distress was jarring. A part of me, the part that still remembered her as my mom, felt a tiny flicker of remorse. But then she said something that extinguished that flicker faster than blowing out a candle. "You should have just let it go," she snarled, the fear momentarily replaced by a resurgence of her old bitterness. "You'll never make it without me anyway. You're just a spoiled brat who can't handle anything on your own." That's when I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, she still didn't understand. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not truly. It was about something far more fundamental. It was about finally being free from her control, free from her constant belittling, free from the way she consistently undermined my aspirations. It was about asserting my own agency, my own worth, and my own path in life. The audit was just the mechanism. A few weeks later, I heard from one of my old neighbors, a sweet lady who still kept in touch with me. She called, sounding worried. She said she'd seen a lot of official-looking mail coming to my mom's house, and that my mom had been telling everyone that the government was persecuting her. She also mentioned that my mom's bank accounts had been frozen temporarily. The investigator had done his job. My mom was furious, of course, telling anyone who would listen that it was all my fault. But she forgot something crucial. She didn't just steal from me. She stole from a government-backed scholarship. That money, that $12,000, had to be accounted for somewhere. And she'd made the incredibly foolish mistake of declaring it as household support income on her taxes the previous year, probably thinking it would just disappear into the rest of her earnings. Meaning, not only did she steal my scholarship, she basically told the IRS she earned it, without actually paying taxes on it. And that, my friends, is a mistake the IRS doesn't take lightly. Months went by after that. The school year continued, and I focused intensely on my classes. The fear of losing my scholarship completely was a constant, low-level hum in the background, but I kept my head down, worked my 2 part-time jobs, and poured all my energy into my studies. I tried not to think about my mom, or the IRS, or any of the messy fallout. I just focused on getting through each day, each assignment, each exam. It was the only way to keep moving forward. Then, one brisk morning in late spring, I got an email from the university again. My heart leaped into my throat. The subject line read, "Scholarship Reinstatement Decision." I remember staring at that line for what felt like an eternity, my fingers hovering over the mouse. I braced myself for the worst. Maybe they decided to revoke it altogether, deeming the whole situation too problematic. Perhaps I'd get a partial amount back but be left with mountains of debt. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. This was it, the final verdict. But instead, as the email loaded, my eyes scanned the words and then I reread them. And then again. It said, "After a thorough review of your case, and in light of the unauthorized grant use by a third party, the scholarship has been fully reinstated under the sole control of the recipient, my name. Previous misuse has been documented and corrected. You will continue to receive full funding as originally awarded, including any missed stipends." I stared at the screen in disbelief. My mouth fell open. They de-reinstated everything. Not only that, but they'd gone a step further. They had set up a completely separate, secure account for my stipends and allowances, accessible only by me, with clear guidelines and direct oversight. There would be no more joint accounts. They even gave me back pay for the months I'd missed, the months I'd been working extra jobs and skipping meals. The missing $12,000, plus the stipends I hadn't received, were now sitting in my new, secure account. It felt like winning the lottery, but better, because it was a win that felt earned, fought for, and truly mine. It was tangible proof that my decision, though terrifying, had been the right one. And it didn't stop there. The wheels of federal bureaucracy, once set in motion, turned slowly but relentlessly. A month later, my mom texted me again. This time, there was no anger, no accusations, just pure, unadulterated desperation. "They're making me pay back everything," she said, her message riddled with typos. "Plus massive penalties. I don't have that kind of money, you have to help me." Apparently, the IRS had completed their audit. And in their thorough review, they found that she hadn't just misreported my scholarship money. They'd uncovered other inconsistencies, other instances where she had underreported income from her various side jobs. With the accumulated back taxes, the penalties for fraud, and the interest, she now owed triple what she had initially taken from me, over $36,000. It was a sum that, for someone in her financial situation, was astronomical, crippling. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a long, triumphant message. I simply typed back, my fingers moving with a quiet confidence I'd never known I possessed. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before stealing from your own kid." She blocked me after that. The notification popped up on my screen, brief and final. And honestly, it was the most peaceful silence I've ever had in my life. It wasn't just a physical blocking, it was an emotional one. A barrier had been put up, not by me, but by her, that finally, truly, severed the toxic ties. The relief was immense, like a heavy weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. I was free. It's been 2 years since then. The university is a distant memory, a beautiful chapter closed. I graduated with honors, something I never thought possible when I first arrived there, broken and hungry. The minute I finished my last final, I had a full-time job waiting for me at a tech company, a job I'd interned at and loved. I'm building my career, paying my own bills, and living in an apartment that finally feels like truly mine. Every time tax season comes around, or I see a news report about tax fraud, I can't help but smirk a little. Because I know somewhere out there, my mom's probably double-checking her paperwork now, sweating over every deduction, every reported dollar. The lessons the IRS taught her were far more effective than any I could have given. Do I forgive her? That's a complicated question. Maybe one day in a far distant future, I'll find a way to let go of the anger and the pain. But for now, what I've learned is something much more valuable than money or even forgiveness. I've learned resilience. I've learned that people can take your things, your comfort, even your trust. They can try to break your spirit, but they cannot take your will to rise again. They can't steal your determination. When I walked across that stage at graduation, the sun warm on my face, my cap and gown swishing around me, I didn't see her in the crowd. There was no proud parent clapping for me, and for the first time, that didn't bother me, not even a little bit. Because in that moment, receiving my diploma, looking out at the sea of faces, I finally realized. I didn't need her approval to be proud of myself. I made it here on my own. Every step, every struggle, every triumph was mine, and that was more validating than any applause. And the best part? The universe, it seems, has a funny way of balancing things out. A few months after graduation, just when I was settling into my new job, I got a letter from a legal aid group connected to the university. It was a surprising, unexpected package. They offered me a grant, a full-ride scholarship for grad school, funded by an anonymous donor who had heard about my case. It turns out, one of the compliance officers, the one who first helped me, had shared my story, anonymously, of course, protecting my privacy, as an example of student perseverance in the face of incredible obstacles. That donor, it wasn't some faceless corporation. It was a retired professor, a kind and brilliant woman who, after hearing the bare bones of my story, had reached out to the university. She had a passion for helping students overcome adversity, and she told the legal aid group, no student should ever lose their dream because of someone else's greed. She funded an entire scholarship in my name, specifically for students who face similar challenges. I'm now part of a small, select group of students benefiting from her generosity, and I get to meet her occasionally and thank her in person. It's truly incredible. Now I'm pursuing my master's degree, debt-free, stress-free, and finally, completely independent in every sense of the word. It's a second chance, a fresh start, and it feels like the universe is finally on my side. Sometimes, when I tell people what happened, they ask if I ever got the chance to confront her again, to say all the things I couldn't say before. And I always say the same thing. I didn't need to. The system did it for me. Because justice doesn't always come from shouting, or fighting, or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it comes quietly in the form of an audit letter, or a frozen bank account, and a life lesson that costs triple the original price. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's this. You can't control what people do to you. You can't control their choices or their greed, but you can always control how you respond. And when you do the right thing, even if it's scary, even if it feels like you're going against your own family, the truth always finds a way to win. Education beats exploitation, every single time. Watch the next story. You're gonna love this one.